VikesNow, Dustin Baker. This is the Wednesday midweek edition, joined by my regular guest, the editor of PurplePTSD.com, Josh Frey. How's your week going, Chief?
It's going good, my man. Well, it's gotten better since Sunday at least. So
Yeah, we were
hopefully we
all.
can hopefully you can chat out the last few demons of that, and then we can get on to hopefully it'll be an ass kicking against Indy this week.
Yeah, you were. Did you end up changing? You did change your mind that the Lions were going to. Yeah, so we
Yeah.
kind of felt that coming. I just thought that it wouldn't be undone by a weird onside kick. I thought, I don't know, I thought it would be an entertaining, exciting game where the Lions won by about 3, not something that seemed, like, what are we doing here, boys? But here's what I want to do before we get into what the hell happened in that game. I want to give you a life raft
Okay.
because the defense doesn't look like they're going to change much. Ed Dontel today said, we like what we're doing up front. We're just so close. And that usually means nobody's going to change. We shall see. However, I want to give you a life raft. The team ranks 32nd in total defense yards allowed, 32nd passing yards allowed. You have been a proponent of Super Bowl contendership for the Vikings. Do you see it a little bit differently after the Lions loss?
I do see it a little bit differently. I do still think that there's a path to get to that NFC championship game,
Okay.
but I feel much less confident about going up against either Dallas or Philly after what we saw this past weekend and what we've been seeing for the past few weeks. I thought, we get Dantzler back in there, we get a little bit healthy on the defensive side, and we could probably compete with anybody. But that happened this week. Obviously, we didn't have Harrison Smith, so that's still a loss. But I don't think he's going to make up for almost 500 yards of offense that the Detroit Lions put up on you. So I mean, I see a path to the NFC title game, but after that, I wouldn't pick them against either one of those other two teams.
Okay, that's fair. And I think right along with you, after the Washington win, which felt like they just flipped a switch and won the damn thing. And then, of course, after beating the Bills, how could you not start to
Yeah,
salivate over what could be? But I think right now that not the best case scenario, but the most probable scenario is they win whoever they play at US Bank Stadium, the wild card round, and then they probably lose the nail biter to whoever they play thereafter, whether that's at US Bank, probably, because the only solace we can take is that 32nd ranked defense per yards allowed, can't really run the football very well. Time of possessions, 25th in the league. The only solace we can take is that the Vikings somehow became the first team to circumvent all of those and were one of the worst teams to ever win a Super Bowl. We would take it, but I think that would have to be our positive spin right now because the way that they've played recently in the last 4 weeks, they're 2-2, including the Dallas loss. It just seems like they feel more like a 8-6 team than they do a 10 and what are they 10 and 3? I guess what would they have to be 7-6 to 10 and 3? Is that fair?
I'd say they're a little bit better than 7-6, just
Okay.
because you get down there and you're looking at Seattle Seahawks, New York Giants. I think they're better than those two teams. I think this week I'd probably put them probably around seven or eighth in the league right now. So I mean they're not one of those fledgling wild card teams that we're seeing around the league right now, like the Jets, the Giants, those types of teams. I think they're a tier above that, but again, they're not on that. They're not on that Super Bowl tier like with the Bills, the Chiefs, all
Okay.
those other guys.
I think the statistically by the numbers, that's what I mean, that they're closer
Yeah,
to a 7-6 feeling team.
right.
But they do the only thing this team does tremendously elite is usually fourth quarter heroism, where they, third quarter, it was a nightmare, offense and defense. And then for some reason, fourth quarter, they're like, all right, now we can do the thing. So that's what they have going for them. And that's why they're 10 and 3 and not the 7-6 thing that I got going on. All right, on the defense, Kevin O'Connell was shoved into talking about it in the post game, or I believe maybe it was Monday morning, where it sounded like he was going to effectuate some change. And then today, Ed Donatil said, "Oh yeah, we might play a little bit more press coverage or man coverage with cornerbacks, but we like what we have up front with our 4 guys. They're this close, baby." Do you expect against the Colts to see defensive changes, because what was going on in Detroit did not do the job?
Well, I mean, if you're going to experiment with some defensive changes at this point in the season, the Indianapolis Colts are probably the team to do it
Yeah.
against, considering they're going to be rolling out Matt Ryan again, who leads the league in interceptions and fumbles. So, if you're going to try some new things out on defenses, it's probably the week to do it. Especially you roll out that offense, hopefully you can put up a good 25, 30 points on them as well. So yeah, I mean, why not try something? Because obviously what we're doing right now is not working out too well. I wouldn't go as far to say like, oh, we need to change things super dramatically to get rid of Ed Donatel or get rid of play calling for him, because I've seen a lot of people pointing to that 2012 Baltimore Ravens squad. They didn't have a first year head coach when they fired their offensive coordinator. John Harbaugh was in his 5th year as a head coach for that team, and he had oodles of experience as a coordinator prior to that. So I wouldn't go that far, but if you want to mix things up and do a little bit more press coverage, maybe send a few more intricate blitzes here and there, I say why not? Why the hell not at this point?
What if I was in the room, which I'm not and probably never will be, I would say, hey guys, you know that defense you play in the fourth quarter? Let's just do that. Whatever you have that called in your playbook or whatever, go button. I would just say, just do that the whole game. And who cares if you get burned, because you're already getting burned every once in a while. That's what my rudimentary synopsis would be. Although I'm sure it's a lot more complicated, because it's so weird how before last week, every game they flip a switch in the fourth quarter, game over, Vikings win. And for the life of me, why they don't just do that from the kickoff? Like, we're at a point where it can't get worse in terms of yards allowed. It flat out cannot. They had that stat on Fox about first time in franchise history they've allowed 400 plus yard, and 400 plus is generous. It's usually like 460 or 480. And yeah, by the numbers, this Vikings defense per yards allowed is the 20th worst in NFL history through 13 games played. So there's no way to dress it up as rosy aside from complimenting the fourth quarter production. On the loss at the Lions, they look like they're pretty scrappy upstart. And you start to play around playoff machines, they have a reasonable pathway to the postseason. And that's because it was almost a season-saving win against the Vikings. When you talked about earlier on the show about having a couple of days to recover, even though you predict the Lions to win, what stood out to you about that loss for Minnesota?
I think just that talent that they've got all over in terms of their skill positions for Detroit. Like Jamison Williams, he only had that 141-yard catch, but I mean that was a big play, and they've got a couple guys that they can just run out there and they're going to make big plays all the time, and they did it a bunch of times. On Sunday, DJ Chark had another big catch in there too. You can't just forget about DeAndre Swift or Jamal Williams in the backfield either. Like, and the offensive line is probably one of the best in the entire league. So yeah, this team on the offensive side, clicking on all cylinders. They've got playmakers all over the place, and it's going to be a team that next year we're going to have to legitimately talk about as probably one of the premier teams in the NFC.
Yeah, because they won't get they probably won't get off to their terrible 1-6 start, which just put them underwater. And
they've got the LA Rams draft pick, so they could go get out one of these premier defenders too. So like they're going to end up with a top 5 pick, probably get a guy on the defensive front that can make some plays alongside Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah,
this team's scary.
That I have to ask you. It seems that you talked about them perhaps drafting an edge rusher or something like that. It seems like they have kind of talked themselves into Goff just being the guy, like a total reclamation from the end of his Rams tenure when he just looked like a buffoon. Do you believe that this is their guy? He's not crazy old, and this is just their franchise quarterback.
I mean, might as well. I mean, you've got one of the best offenses in the entire league with him under center. And if you're going to run back pretty much the exact same offense, you might as well keep him at QB, because it seems to be working out pretty well. And your defense is not good. So I think that should be the priority this offseason for sure.
Because if they had not rectified the 1-6 start, maybe got up to, I don't know, 6-11 or something,
yeah,
they probably would have got into this quarterback sweepstakes, because you can't really sell to your fan base that, oh yeah, Goff, he's going to be different next year. It's been just an outlier these last 2 or 3 years. So you don't foresee them, no matter how they finish here, exploring a quarterback in April, because we'll talk all about that when we get there. But
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the record multiple times saying that I'm not super sold on this QB class to begin with.
Okay, that's right.
But
I forget that.
yeah, but I mean, either way, I do think there's going to be a couple guys that are intriguing to take in the first round. But again, that defense, if they had a good defense, they're probably up there with the Vikings competing for this NFC North right now. Because early in the season, especially, that was a horrendous group. Like what we're seeing from the Vikings
Yeah,
right now is what they were running out on a weekly basis. So if they can improve that anyway, that's probably another 2-3 wins to their record right now.
yeah. Yeah, if you mark your calendar to it, and there should be no correlation, but it's true. From the moment they traded TJ Hawkinson, their defense got good. Doesn't make any sense. I know you're like, well, what does that have to do with anything? But it's just coincidental. If you pull EPA per play or DVOA, it's like the start of November, they've become a top 10 defense, and it probably has to do with whoever that was that they fired. I don't know if that was a passing game coordinator or a defensive coordinator, but they fired somebody, and that changed everything. So
Yeah, I don't remember who they fired either,
I
but
think
yeah,
it was
it's
Aubrey
weird.
something.
Yeah, it's super weird how that worked out
Yeah.
exactly as they traded him, and then both teams kind of went on a mini run. The Vikings have kind of cooled down since then, but yeah, really weird.
Yeah.
Seems to have worked out for both teams though.
The One of the sexy things to criticize against the Lions was all of a sudden Kevin O'Connell's strange or whimsical decision making. For example, you had a almost trick play from Dalvin Cook to Johnny Munch, which would have been a touchdown if not for a fumble. You had a 2-point conversion play in the analytics calculator after Adam Thielen scored a 23-yard touchdown. Didn't work. If it would have worked, probably would have been marvelous. And then I still can't wrap my head around this one, the onside kick. Out of all of KOC's decision making, do you have grievance with any of those, kind sir?
I guess the onside kick would probably be the one that I have the most with, just because you're probably not going to recover that in today's NFL, like nobody does anymore. But that also assumes that you'd have to have some faith in your defense to get a stop. And to
Yeah.
that point in that game, I'd be kind of with KOC on that as well. Like I don't know if we can actually stop these guys, so we might as well try to get the ball back. The Dalvin Cook play was weird just all around. Um, I put most of that on Cook just because one, you've practiced that play before. You got to know what you're going to do in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Two, if you see the pressure coming, you can just go down. We'll try it again on second down, do something else, try to get a TD there. But in terms of the actual scheme, one, I probably wouldn't run it out on first down,
Okay.
on first and goal on the goal line. And two, I don't know how comfortable I would be doing that play with a backup center alongside
Yeah.
rookie Ed Ingram, trying to be basically the main protectors of that play. But I mean, if it works out, we're looking at that play and like, oh man, KOC is a genius. So I'm not gonna knock him too much for trying to be creative, because that's what we all wanted all offseason. We wanted a head coach that was going to be creative and make these play calls. But there were a few things about that situation that were a little bit iffy in my opinion. But I'm not gonna hold it against him.
Sure. What about the 2-point conversion on the road? You go for the 2 now to go for the win later. It's a classic analytics laden decision. And I tweeted something to the effect of that everybody wants an analytics coach until you get to the analytics coach part of the regular season and he does analytics coach things. Did you have beef with that one because of momentum or what have you?
When it happened, I was a little confused because I didn't realize the analytical part of that where it said you should go for it in that situation, which it makes sense now
Yeah.
looking back on it. But yeah, in the moment I was like, this seems like a weird spot to be going for two, but I do get it. You're on the road in a divisional game. You want to win. So you want to go out there and just make a statement,
The
but
working theory, they probably don't put momentum into the calculator, but the working theory is you just scored, you should have momentum, you get the 2 points, and then when you go to win the game, you don't have to worry about, all you have to do is kick an extra point, which is a big deal for these
right.
Vikings. Or if you messed it up, then all you have to do is get a 2-point conversion to make up for it. And the odds of failing on back-to-back 2-point conversions, if you have a decent defense, decent offense, aren't very, I mean, you're probably going to get one or the other. So that was the mindset behind it. I just think that somebody should have probably pulled Kevin O'Connell aside and said, "You're the coach of the Vikings. Like, well, just take what we can get, homie, and live to fight another day." But no, he can't think that way. But I didn't have any grievance. The only one I had beef with was onside kicks because They have no purpose in the game unless it's utter desperation with like 10 seconds left. A 6% recovery rate, they are guaranteed to be futile. And when I was a kid or even a young man, they used to be fun. You used to crave them. But then too many people got hurt slamming into each other, and the NFL changed the rule. So if they ever got to the point where they do 4th and 25 or whatever it is, I would be down, even though that would just skewer the Vikings at times on the defensive side. I'd be down with that because these days onside kicks, I mean, they're just moronic. And I was really surprised that somebody hoodwinked him into trying that. I'm going to guess Matt Daniels is just like, hey, baby, we got one. We know what we're doing. That's the only thing I could think of is he got in his ear and said, I can do this. And, really wasn't even that close. Let's do one more thing on Detroit. Kirk Cousins, I will say, in terms of the way that he threw the ball, like, I swear to God, that was the best I've seen him throw the football since 2018. What does it say about the franchise if the quarterback has his best game by far of the year, and it didn't even feel like they really had a chance in the final 10 minutes of real time?
I again, it goes back to that defense. You're not going to win too many more games, especially in a postseason situation where you've got a QB that can go out there, rip 400 yards out, and you're trailing by 2 possessions pretty much the entire way. So I really hope that they run some things out a little bit differently on that side against Indy. Just mix it up a little bit, because what we're doing right now is not working, and it's not going to work against some of the more premier teams in the NFC, because right now the Lions are great, but they're still not Philly, Dallas, San Francisco. Like, against those teams, you're going to run into a lot more trouble, especially in terms of like the running game, which Detroit didn't really do all that much with on Sunday. And San Francisco, you better bet your ass that Christian McCaffrey is going to get a lot of touches in that one. Then you go into Philly, Miles Sanders is going to get a lot, Jalen Hurts is going to run a lot, and it's going to be a whole thing. So I do think that they need to fix some things. They need to change some things up this week. That's what that Kirk Cousins showing, and then the 2 possession loss really told me more than anything else.
And he even said that the silver lining to that loss is that now we don't have he didn't say this expressly, but he said it paraphrasing. We can't sweep anything under the rug because we won. That's what we've done all year, is that this defense has been deodorized by wins. And now when you lose, you look at it, and then, they were 31st in yards allowed last week. And nobody besides like you and me cared. The fans were like, hey, baby, why are you saying that shit? We're 10-2. And then you lose, and you're like, got to fire Ed Donatel. And that's where that's just everything. The wins and losses. All right. So the Colts, the Vikings have not beat them since 1997. And I believe the game they beat them was a catapult to get into the postseason. That was my second year of watching Vikings football, and they've lost 6 straight times. It's by far the longest gap the Vikings have of beating or losing consecutively to a franchise. The next closest team, they haven't beat the Colts since 2015. Every time the Vikings play the Colts, the last 2 times, they've played like utter shit. 2016, I don't know if you were watching the Vikings intently back then, but they looked like absolute rubbish in that contest. And then in 2020, week 2, that was also their most anemic game, and they never really recovered. They tried to make it exciting because Dalvin Cook became a MVP candidate for a week. But do you foresee any horror shows from the Colts game this weekend?
If we do see any horror shows against this Colts team, we're gonna have to have some serious conversations about how far this team can actually go, because right now, Colts, they're coming off a bye. They've got some extra preparation for this one.
And the motivation of just having their ass thoroughly beat 54-19.
Right. Yeah. So there is a little bit of factor that you have to take into. Obviously, you can't sleep on them. Like, you can't sleep on any NFL opponent at this point in the season. So, but Jeff Saturday, head coach, he's still in his first actual month of head coaching experience in his entire life. So I hope KOC doesn't have any troubles against him in terms of being out coached, like some people were saying about Dan Campbell last Sunday. And then their defense, they've got a few playmakers, but it's not been the same sort of Colts defense that we've seen in years past, where they're leading that team to victories, 2020 Phillip Rivers style. And then offensive side, Jonathan Taylor's been super quiet all season. Matt Ryan, we've already talked about, not a great year for him. Sam Ehlinger came in for 2 games, wasn't great either. So, and there's really no reason why the Vikings should lose this week. I really don't think so. So I really hope that they come out this weekend and really make a statement, because they need to after what happened in Detroit.
It is their last time on the schedule to win a game handily, in my opinion. Why is that? Well, they're going to play the Giants, who probably will be in desperation mode on Christmas Eve because their season has funneled down a tube to an extent, and they're going to need probably to win after maybe losing this weekend to Washington to stay in the thick of things. So they're not going to get this Colts team who probably doesn't give a shit about what happens to them. So they're not, they'll be great if they blow out the Giants, but I don't think they will. And then if you are one to predict a blowout at Green Bay or at Chicago, then, you're smoking methamphetamines, because it just never happens there. So I think that this is the last best chance for the Vikings to win finally by more than a score or two. And I'm picking the Vikings 40-21, which is probably their version of a blowout. And then actually tomorrow is the 3-year anniversary of the Vikings winning a game by 17 or more points. The last time they did so was against the Chargers in 2019, the game where Afadia Dembo had a defensive touchdown. That was the last time, 3 years, that the Vikings have won by 17 or more points in a game. So I'm optimistic this week. I do really think that they bounce back, and even the defense, because they're playing this, miniature offense led by old Matt Ryan. I really think that we'll be tricked a little bit and thinking, all right, they've made some fixes, chiefly because the Colts aren't world beaters. What is your prediction, sir, for Vikings Colts at US Bank Stadium?
Well, I'm not quite on the same train as you in terms of the 40 points for the offense, but I do think that they're going to finally win a game by 2 possessions. I'm going to take the Vikings 23-13. I think the Colts defense is nothing really to sleep on. So I don't think that they're going to roll them over as much as maybe their defense will roll over the offense, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
So I'm going to go 10 points, nice clean victory through and through. Don't leave anything in doubt.
All right, let's assume the Vikings win the wild card game against Washington, Seattle, or New York. It's a huge assumption. I get it. It's too early, but let's assume that happens. And then they lose the following week to the Bucks or the 49ers, something like that. That puts them at draft position, probably 25, 26. What's the flavor of the week from Josh Fry for the Vikings first round pick?
If they're picking that low, my 2 picks that I'm looking at right now would probably be Clemson linebacker Trenton Simpson. We've talked about him a couple times on the show already. Off ball, yep. So yeah, basically the Eric Kendricks of this draft is what I'm looking at. And then the other side of the ball, I'm looking maybe Rashee Rice out of SMU, wide receiver. Just get another guy opposite Justin Jefferson, because Thielen and Osborne haven't really done it so far this year, at least in terms of a true wide receiver 2. Rice has put up all the stats throughout his entire career. He led the NCAA in terms of receiving yards this season. So I think you'd get another playmaker opposite JJ, and you'll be looking good to go in 2023.
Is it those dudes in particular you like, or do you think that linebacker and wide receiver are the smartest positions for the short and long term?
Linebacker, wide receiver, probably the smartest positions. And if those guys are available, those are the 2 guys that I'm targeting.
Okay. And you're evidently operating under the pretense that Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth will eventually be good, and that Peterson will be back, because if you're not high on those 2 and you think Peterson's going to walk, then for the love of God, you need a cornerback.
Yeah, I do think I think Evans is going to be back. I think when he was on the field, he looked really dang good. So I think he get him back. Hopefully, he doesn't have as many concussions next year.
Yeah,
and
my goodness.
He'll be able to bounce back. And I think he's got the talent to be a CB2 in this league. So I think you get him out there. Andrew Booth shows you anything, hopefully, as terms of the second round pick, gets back healthy. So hopefully they'll have those 2 guys back, and I think they'll be good at cornerback position next year.
Well, I agree. But get ready for that debate.
Yeah.
Whenever their Vikings are eliminated, whether that's mid-January, they're not eliminated at all. In February, March, and April, our community, our fans, our folks, we're going to debate whether or not the Vikings need a cornerback, because there's going to be some of us that say Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth need time to mature and develop. And there's going to some that say those are busts. Cameron Dantzler's mid, Peterson's going to be 33 at that time. So yeah, we're going to have an intense debate about whether or not the Vikings need a cornerback. Not that you and I are going to have it, but the world will have it. All right, sir. Any closing arguments before we log off for the week?
Let's go get a dang old win this weekend, huh?
Yeah, clinch the division, guarantee a home playoff game, and keep the 49ers at bay. Because if the Vikings continue this temporary bullshit, then the Niners will surpass them in a heartbeat, and then they'll be staring down at the Bucks between the 3 and 4th seed. All right, homie. We'll see you 1 week to discuss the aftermath of this and to preview Christmas Eve.
Sounds good, my man. See you then.
All right, Skull, baby.